Good day, children. Today we move on to the next lesson from the textbook Moments. The lesson is titled A House is Not a Home by Zan Godiozo. Zan Godiozo is an author based in California. She has contributed stories to and edited the famous Chicken Soup for the Soul book series. These books consist of short stories that seek to comfort and inspire readers. And among these, her most notable contributions have been for the book Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul 3. Zan has also co-written The Buddha Next Door, Ordinary People, Extraordinary Stories. This story, A House is Not a Home, it relates to the experience of the writer after she joined a new high school. So this is from a personal biography, we can say, because this is her own experience which she is reflecting through this work. So let's start the lesson. My first year of high school felt awkward. After leaving junior high at the head of my class with all the seniority the upper grade levels could afford me, it felt strange starting over as a freshman. The school was twice as big as my old school, and to make matters worse, my closest friends were sent to a different high school. I felt very isolated. So, awkward here means strange. Freshman is actually a student who is studying in the first year of high school, college, or university. So, when you join high school, college, or university as a first year student, you are known as a freshman. Isolated means lonely. So, as the narrator entered high school, in the first year, he felt very strange because in this junior school he had been the head of the class and had enjoyed all the privileges given to a senior. So, it was uncomfortable to be a fresher at a high school. So, and the school that he was attending was twice as big as the older school that he studied in. And to make matters worse, his friends had, got into other schools. So he felt very lonely. I missed my old teachers so much that I would go back and visit them. They would encourage me to get involved in school activities so that I could meet new people. They told me that in time I would adjust and probably end up loving my new school more than I had my old one. They made me promise that when that happened, I would still come by and visit them from time to time. I understood the psychology in what they were saying, but I took some comfort in it nonetheless. So he would go back to his, he missed his school so much, his teachers so much that, he would go back to his old school to meet his teachers, and his teachers would encourage him to meet new people in the new school and also to get involved in new activities. And I think when you shift school, that's what you usually do, isn't it? Maybe due to various reasons you may have to shift from your school, and those children or students who have shifted schools would clearly identify, now you move to a new place, to a new school, a totally new atmosphere, and to find new friends is a big challenge. You might miss your old school, you might miss your close friends. So here the narrator is also feeling the same. And the teachers at the old school, made him promise that he would visit them even when he got settled in his new school, so that he will always keep in touch with his teachers and his old school. So the narrator tried to feel comfortable with these encouraging words of his teacher. One Sunday afternoon, not long after I had started high school, I was sitting at home at a dining room table doing homework. It was a cold and windy fall day, and we had a fire going in our fireplace. As usual, my red tabby cat was lying on top of all my papers, purring loudly and occasionally swatting at my pen for entertainment's sake. So, one Sunday afternoon, not long before he had started his high school, so he was sitting on at the dining room table, and he was doing his homework, and it was a very cold and windy day. So they had already had a fire put up at the fireplace, and the narrator's pet cat was also lying on top of the sheets of paper, and it was making a purring sound. Purring sound is a sound made by the cat. and the cat was hitting on his pen with its tail, just for some amusement. And she was never far from me. I had rescued her when she was a kitten, and somehow she knew that I was the one responsible for giving her the good life. So, since the narrator had saved the cat, it remained very close to him as he had protected her. My mother kept stoking the fire to keep the house nice and warm. Suddenly, I smelled something strange, and then I noticed it, smoke pouring in through the seams of the ceiling. The smoke began to fill the room so quickly that we could barely see. Groping our way to the front door, we all ran out into the front yard. By the time we made our way outside, the whole roof was engulfed in flames and it was spreading quickly. I ran to the neighbors to call the fire department while I watched my mother run back into the house. So, stoking the fire means to tent the fire, that is, to make sure that you poke the fire with an iron rod to ensure that the fire is being, that the wood is being burnt properly. Groping means to search blindly, especially when your vision is blurred, your vision is not clear, you try to grope or you try to identify things in front of you. You're trying to blindly search for things. Engulfed means flooded or surrounded by. So the narrator's mother tended to the fire kept in the house, tended to the fire in the fireplace in order to keep the house warm. And there was smoke which filled the entire room from the ceiling. So within a few seconds it filled the room and they could hardly see anything. And therefore they immediately rushed out through the front door and they escaped into the garden. So the roof had caught fire which spread quite quickly. The narrator ran to the neighbors to call the fire department while his mother ran inside the house. My mother then ran out of the house carrying a small metal box full of important documents. She dropped the case on the lawn and in a crazed state ran back into the house. I knew what she was after. My father had died when I was young and I was certain that she was not going to let his pictures and letters go up in flames. They were the only things that she had to remember him by. Still, I screamed at her, "Mom, no!" So, the narrator's mother came out of the house. She ran into the house. When the narrator had gone to the neighbor's house to call the fire department, the mother had gone inside the house again. So this time she came out of the house carrying a small box full of important documents or papers, and she threw it on the lawn and then she ran back again. So what she was trying to do was she was trying to save some important things which held a great value for her. Because her husband, the narrator's father, had died when the narrator was a young child. So the mother had to save all the pictures and the letters which were a part of her husband's memory, and that was all that remained for her about him, and so she wanted to save that. But even though the narrator was aware of this, he still screams at her to not go into the burning house. I was about to run after her when I felt a large hand hold me back. It was a fireman. I hadn't even noticed that the street had already filled with fire trucks. I was trying to free myself from his grasp, yelling, "You don't understand! My mother's in there!" So the narrator tried to run after his mother, but he was stopped by a firefighter. The whole street was full of firefighter trucks, and the fire trucks were there, and the narrator tried to free himself and even tried to explain to the firefighter that his mother had gone inside the house and he wanted to bring her back. He held on to me while other firefighters ran into the house. He knew that I wasn't acting very logically and that if he were to let go, I would run. He was right. So the firefighter did not let him go because he knew that the very next moment the narrator would actually run into the house if he just loosened the grip on the little boy. "It's all right, they will get her," he said. So he assured the boy that the firefighter would bring his mother back. He wrapped a blanket around me and sat me down in our car. Soon after that, a fireman emerged from our house with my mom in tow. He quickly took her over to the truck and put an oxygen mask on her. I ran over and hugged her. All those times I ever argued with her and hated her vanished at the thought of losing her. So, in tow means behind, okay? So, the firefighter had wrapped a blanket around the narrator and made him sit in their car. A fireman came out of the house with the narrator's mother behind him, and he took her to the fire truck and placed an oxygen mask on her face. So the narrator ran to his mother and hugged her because the thought of losing his mother, it just brought out all that affection he had for his mother, and all that thoughts he ever had of having argued with her, of having hated her, or any sort of dislike he had towards his mother. Everything just disappeared from his mind when he thought that he would have lost her in that accident. So I think that's true with all of us children, isn't it? I think it's true with all the children, because there will be a point where you might feel a little upset with your parents, especially mothers, because mothers tend to scold children more than the fathers. So probably stop you from doing things that you like. They are worried about you, they want good about you, but then you feel irritated, you might feel a little bit upset about it. But after all, mothers are concerned about their children. But all that dislike or even that small bitterness in your heart, a feeling of that, why is my mother always stopping me from doing things, all that just vanishes when you think about, when you come across a situation where it's almost like a life and death situation. So here the narrator realizes how much he loved his mother. "She's going to be okay," said the fireman. She just inhaled a little smoke. And then he ran back to fight the fire while my mother and I sat there dazed. I remember watching my house burn down and thinking that there was nothing I could do about it. So the fireman calmed the narrator and said that his mother would be fine, and only thing was that she had inhaled some smoke. So the fireman then ran into the house to bring down the fire, while the mother and the son sat there wondering on what had happened. The narrator still remembers how he saw his house burn and felt helpless about it. 5 hours later, the fire was finally out. Our house was almost completely burned down. But then it struck me. I hadn't seen my cat. Where was my cat? Much to my horror, I realized that she was nowhere to be found. Then all at once it hit me. The new school, the fire, my cat. I broke down in tears and cried and cried. I was suffering loss. Big time. So it took almost 5 hours to control the fire, and the house was completely burned down. And the narrator realized then that his pet cat was missing. He could not find it anywhere, and he became very sad and depressed, thinking about the difficulty he's already facing in adjusting to a new school. And right now his house burned down, and he also lost his pet. And all this made him cry. He thought that he was suffering many losses at once. The fireman wouldn't let us go back into the house that night. It was still dangerous. Dead or alive, I couldn't imagine leaving without knowing about my cat. Regardless, I had to go. We piled into the car with just the clothes on our backs and a few of the fireman's blankets and made our way to my grandparents' house to spend the night. So they were not allowed to get back to their building because it could be dangerous. So the narrator wanted to know about his cat, but then he had no choice other than to leave from there. So they got into their car with none of their belongings. All they had were the blankets that was given to them by the fireman and the dress that they were wearing. Other than that, they did not have anything with them. So they made their way to the narrator's grandparents' house to spend the night. The next day, Monday, I went to school. When the fire broke out, I was still wearing the dress I had worn to church that morning, but I had no shoes. I had kicked them off when I was doing my homework. They became yet another casualty of the fire. So I had to borrow some tennis shoes from my aunt. Why couldn't I just stay home from school? My mother wouldn't hear of it, but I was totally embarrassed by everything. The clothes I was wearing looked weird. I had no books or homework, and my backpack was gone. I had my life in that backpack. The more I tried to fit in, the worse it got. Was I destined to be an outcast and a geek all my life? That's what it felt like. I didn't want to grow up, change, or have to handle life if it was going to be this way. I just wanted to curl up and die. So here, weird means strange, destined, developed as per a predestined plan. Outcast means a person who is rejected by the society. Geek is somebody who's unfashionable or who is socially inept, socially don't conform to the societal rules. That's a geek. So the narrator had to go to school the next day. It was Monday. So at the time of the fire, he was actually wearing a dress which he had worn to the church on Sunday, and he wasn't wearing his shoes. He had removed them and kicked them off when he had sat down to do his homework. So they got burnt in the fire too. To go to school, the narrator had to borrow the tennis shoes from his aunt. And he did not want to go to school, but his mother forced him to go. He was embarrassed because his clothes were unusual and he did not have his backpack, books, or even his homework. And he thought that, God wanted that he should live like a person who was different from others, and, he did not fit well into the society, like an outcast. He was so upset that he wished to die in such a situation. I walked around school like a zombie. Everything felt surreal, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen. All the security I had known from my old school, my friends, my house, and my cat had all been ripped away. So, zombie means a dull and apathetic person. I'm sure you all know what a zombie is. Surreal is unreal, strange, bizarre. Ripped away means torn apart. So, the narrator walked around the school like a dull, lifeless person, and he felt insecure as all his belongings, his old school, his friends, his pet cat, and even his house, everything had been snatched away from him. Okay, ripped away, torn apart from him. Okay, so with this, we come to the end of part 1. Thank you, children.